So yeah, just go ahead, say a quick hello if you haven't heard me say this already, and sorry for those who I'm repeating this to. Have a quick look at the image that we're sharing on the screen. What one word sums up what you think when you see this photo? And you can see it's the SFP conference that was held in Oxford in last year, towards the end of last year, or was it summer last year? And just pop that into the chat, just as we're waiting for everybody to arrive. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see what's going on in chat. And welcome everybody. I think I'm going to kick off. There's probably still more people who will join us once we get going, but I want to make the most of the time that we've got. It's great to see so many of you here, so thank you for coming along today. My name's Ben Messer. I work for the Sustainable Food Places programme. I'm working actually within one of the three partner organisations, Food Matters. I'm here with my colleague Callum, also from Food Matters and SFP, who's going to be helping me with the sort of ins and outs of running this session. Around the screen, I can also see there are other members of the SFP team who will make themselves known as we get going. And as and when necessary. There's also members of the team who were piloting the use of the REDI Review Tool, and they will be sharing some of their experiences later on. That's going to be the core part of what we're doing here today. And later on, I'll also introduce to you Kate Chester, who's joining us from Anemo Leadership. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Kate and her involvement with this work towards the end of the programme. So, welcome everybody. We've got an hour and a half. We're going to try and make the most of that time. If you want to involve yourself and ask a question, please feel free to by posting the question in chat. If it's something really pertinent that I'm asking for responses, just use the reactions button to put a hand up on your screen, or even just put your hand up like this, and we'll try and take you in order as you raise your hand and take your questions. And I think there may be opportunities throughout the session for you to do that. We have got quite a lot to cover. I've just, for those of you who haven't been able to see the screen up until now, I posted a picture of the SFP conference Oxford, the participants, the delegates who were there in 2023. Some of you I can see on screen as well, and asked people what word sums up what you think when you see this photo. I will, for those of you who haven't seen it so far, I just will share the screen again quickly so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Hopefully you can see that there. So what word sums up what you think when you see this photo? The only other thing I'm going to ask you to do, if possible, on your screen name, if you could just, as well as your name, maybe have your place where you're coming from. That might be your organization or the place where you're from, so we get a sense of who's in the room with us. Okay, stopping sharing again, which is a bit confusing. Sorry about that. Okay, before we get going, I think I just want to say that we do recognize that people are coming to this topic that we're talking about today from different places. And we're talking about race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think within the working group in SFP, we realized that while some people were aware of what's been going on in SFP, other people are less so. And we wanted to take an opportunity to tell you the story so far, to provide an introduction to what we've been doing in what we're calling Ready for Change, which is the ethos that we've adopted in the Sustainable Food Places program. So the story so far, and introducing the approach and the methodology that we're using. And we're also going to take an opportunity to walk you through one of the outputs of this work, which is the Ready for Change review tool. So we're going to sort of show you that, explain a little bit and walk you through it so you can see what it is that we're talking about. And the purpose of this is just to raise awareness of what this is, and so that more people can engage with the process and can engage with what we're talking about. I'm not going to say much more in introduction, other than to say thank you. I'm just going to have a quick look at what's appeared in chat. Yes, and it is. I can see that people are commenting there in a way that I was sort of expecting, which is very interesting. I've also going to ask you to have another look at this question that I posted up there, with a slightly different lens. I'm going to go back and share screen again. Can I just check with you, Callum, if that's changed?
We can't see your screen yet, Ben.
Okay.
We can now.
Great. So there's a second question there, and I now want you to think, what happens when you view this photo through the lens of race? What do you think now? And again, I want you to just, if you can put, if you haven't done that already, maybe you were doing that already, but it's just to sort of encourage you to look at this in a slightly different way, with a slightly different perspective. What happens when you view this photo through the lens of race? It's funny, I look at that photo and I see all sorts of things. One thing I see is Ben Reynolds, who I haven't seen for a while, who's since left SFP. I also see a lot of women, which is very interesting as well. But there's another sort of clear thing which a lot of you are commenting about already in the chat. So I haven't been able to read that through. Did anything jump out at you there, Callum, from what you saw posted in chat?
Yeah, people talking about a feeling of not being represented, lots and lots of white faces, feeling of uncomfortable by the image.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I'm just going to, if people feel comfortable doing this, it would be quite interesting to expand a little bit on what you've said there. So I can see the comment there from Sherry, unrepresented. If you want to, Sherry, are you happy to just sort of expand a little bit on that one word that you've put there?
Yeah, it's a regular occurrence for me to be in a situation where I am in a room of people and the majority or nearly all of the other people that I'm in the room with are white, and I am the only black person in the room, and I am having to explain, number one, my presence, number two, whether I'm qualified to be in that space, and number three, sometimes what I say is often met with disbelief. So it's become easier over the years having to deal with it, but I still have to deal with it, and I'm still dealing with it today. And it was just really interesting that when you put that picture up there, and often when I join a Zoom or I enter a meeting, I always look for another me. And as I'm looking around the screen today, there isn't another me. And when I looked in the picture, there wasn't another me. And so, it's just highlights how things maybe haven't changed so much over the years.
That's so interesting, Sherry. And earlier on when you were talking there, you said things have got a little bit easier for you. Do you think that's because you have had to change, or do you think that's because anything else has changed around you with the situation?
It's because I've had to change, and because I'm having the same conversation over and over again, it becomes easier. I think because I'm going into different areas and different spaces, I realized that things haven't changed. And when I first started doing these meetings, when I had to do strategic stuff and go to strategic meetings, like 30 years ago, I'd walk in and then, I'd be in a room and I'd think, what are these people talking about? Well, sounds like French to me. But, the more often I went to the meetings, the more I understood. And so, the more I became comfortable with it. But I do still think that we're still we haven't moved on very much, if at all. And that's the sad thing about it, the fact that I'm having to be in spaces where I'm having to explain my experience, where I'm having to, work with people that are not like me when I'm, when I always seem to be the minority.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not just in terms of race, it's also in terms of gender. I will often be in a room that are all men, and I'm the only woman. So I'll be the only Black woman in a space. So, it's kind of, having to take on multiple roles, really.
Thank you for sharing that, Sherry. And I want to sort of put that to other people on the screen in the room, if you like. From what you've heard Sherry just say, does that tally with anybody else's thinking when they look at that image and when they think about what it represents? Does anyone want to sort of also share their thoughts on it? Yeah, Sarita, hi.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, I wrote uncomfortable. And I think, again, like, look, I grew up in Scotland. I've been living in London for over 10 years. And I think I normalized being in white spaces. And then moving to London, one of the reasons I love living here is because of the diversity and the sort of warmth and welcoming that brings. But still, especially through my work, I find being in white spaces more and more than any other aspect of my life. And you notice the discomfort on a daily basis and having to double check yourself and go, am I welcome here? And exactly what Sherry sort of said there. And it's something you just constantly notice. And I'll see it in my public life when I'm in my personal life, when I go into, I don't know, like events and anything. And I just think it's something that just sits with you, and you can normalize it to such an extent, but it's really important to be aware of it, and to sort of think, well, what can other people do to change the situation?
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarita. Do you quickly just also want to share with us your role in Sustain? I think that's quite interesting and important in this.
Yes. So I am Diversity Outreach Coordinator. So I'm focused Sustains an Alliance, if you didn't know that, and we work on SFP amongst other things. And I'm looking at the sort of lack of ethnic diversity within the sustainable food sector in particular, which we know is one of the sort of least representative. But beyond that, wanting to make sure that it's actually a place of inclusion and equity that's got anti-racism at the heart of it. So looking at what we can do to support organisations to sort of move forward on that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Sarita. I'm going to go straight up to, there's a hand up from Ella and Ian, who are calling in from Plymouth.
Hello, so I'm Ella, and I'm here to represent Diversity Business Incubator. We are a business hub, and we work with people, with ethnic entrepreneurs. And one of the things that we do is we organize business networking events for ethnic entrepreneurs. And I get what Sherry is saying, absolutely, because the people we work with and we meet with, they always say that they feel exactly like you. They go in the room and they do not see any representation, and there's no one looking like them. And they don't feel included. They feel alienated. And this is why when we organize a networking event that is specifically for ethnic entrepreneurs, they feel so much, I don't know whether they feel better, but they feel safer and welcome. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So even though I'm still white, I'm here. I'm standing with you.
Thank you, Ella. That's fantastic. And Kate, welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Chester. I'm from Animo Leadership, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the work that I'm going to be doing, but it's lovely to see you, Sarita. I already work with Sustain. What I noticed from that picture and from the equity, diversity and inclusion work that we do at Animo Leadership is the sameness that whiteness brings. And when I've worked with groups of all white leaders, what invariably happens is that there is the same lens. We're looking at things from a very white perspective. And then you add that to being able-bodied, majority, or educated, or English as a first language. And what you end up seeing is something very similar. And so when you don't have lots of diversity in the room, not only is that unjust, you miss things. What sprung to mind when I saw that photo is, what is this group of passionate white people missing because of their whiteness? So that's what struck me, and I just wanted to share that.
So interesting to hear that, because it reminds me of something that a colleague said when I was working on this and talking with this about them, and I'd written a blog which was all very sort of heavy and a little bit angry. And she looked at it and said, you need to put some positivity in there, and you need to say that better representation, particularly around race, can be a reason for hope. It can be a really positive, wonderful thing. So don't sort of go on about it looks wrong, or it feels wrong, or the culture's wrong. Just say, what are you missing? And I completely get what you're saying there, Kate. You know, there's a lot of really good, valuable stuff which is being missed if you are sort of looking at something which is homogenous, or there's this sameness to it. You're missing a whole load of opportunity. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And yes, as we say, I'll come back to Kate later and introduce her a bit better and explain a little bit about our thoughts going forward. Does anybody have anything else they want to share before we go on about their thoughts, looking at this screen and listening to what you've just heard from people? Okay, and as I say, continue to post things in chat if you have a question. Oh, Joe in Torbay, sorry, I missed your hand there.
Sorry, I was trying to find the electronic hand.
Okay.
Probably picking up on what Kate was just saying as well about you know, access to education, or there's something about sort of class or the level of privilege that comes with whiteness, or being, having generations of people in this country, and it's something that we've been starting to explore, and we're only just very new on this, on our sustainable food place journey in Torbay. But kind of, you know, the position of any kind of privilege and the judgment that might come, or, you know, making assumptions about what people should eat, or, you know, where they should get their food from. And if you're coming from quite a homogenous perspective on that, you know, how can we challenge ourselves and include more people in that conversation? So yeah, that was what sprang to my mind.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joe. Okay, I think I don't see any other hands up. I'm ready to move on to the next bit, unless anybody does want to say something before we do. I think what we've just done, looking through the lens of race at that image, I'm just going to sort of float it out there that in some ways that's what we've been doing with Ready for Change, and the whole approach has been looking at food systems transformation work, the work that we do around food in food partnerships and food organizations. Ready for Change is us looking at that through the lens of race. And it's important for me to just mention this, but from this point, and you'll see why in a little bit when I go through the story so far, we've been focusing on race, and there are reasons for that. Going forward, it's unlikely that it will continue to only be focused on race. We are talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion more broadly. But right at the very start of this process, the Ready for Change process was a recognition, because of when we started in 2020, that race is the burning bridge issue. This is what was said at our launch webinar, Race is the Burning Bridge Issue, and it has been what we have focused on within SFP up until this point. It's going to be interesting when we start talking about experiences of trying to apply Ready for Change approach or principles and use the tool. You will hear from Jenny in Shropshire, who's on the screen, talking about the fact that, yes, we did talk more broadly. Jenny took a broader scope when we talked about applying this approach. And that's the beginning of a broadening of our scope when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But today we're talking about the Ready for Change process, the Ready for Change review tool, and the focus is on race. A lot of it is about sharing perspectives. I've been involved in this from its inception, not as a particular expert in this, but someone with a passionate interest in getting it right and doing the right thing and changing behavior and transforming the way we do things. I haven't necessarily led this. I've held the space, and I've worked alongside other really important people in this process right from the beginning. Initially with Elisa Graham-Brown from the Soil Association, we co-led this work, but we've also worked as part of a working group within SFP. And I think it's important to stress that. The working group changes, and we're bringing in new voices, particularly with the pilot projects and new people coming into post as well. But I've been a facilitator of this process. I do have things I contribute to it, but I've been largely facilitating the process. So I thought I'd make that clear as well. So what we're doing is looking at what we do in food systems work through the lens of race. I'm just going to say, finally, what this session today is and what it isn't. So what it is an opportunity to share experience and explain the SFP Ready for Change work. We're going to be highlighting our focus on anti-racism, raising awareness about the REDI Review Tool, and sharing experience from the pilot projects who've been using that tool. You know, some of the lessons learned and their top tips. We're also going to be looking ahead a little bit to what happens next. What we're not going to be doing, there are other opportunities where we will do this, but what we're not going to be doing is sharing experiences of racism. We're not going to be exploring different approaches to anti-racism, and we're not going to be unpacking terminology unless it comes up and is pertinent. We're not going to be unpacking terminology in discussions around race. There, as I say, there are opportunities for that coming up in future sessions, but not in this session. We're really looking at the Ready for Change approach, and we're looking at experience of using the Ready for Change and the REDI Review Tool. So I'm going to share screen again and take you a little bit on a journey of the story so far with Ready for Change. Actually, I should just check. Does anybody just want anything clarified before we go any further and before I share screen? Okay, I will press on and we're in good time. So again, Callum, can I just hear from you if you can see that screen okay?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay. So the screen we were looking at was 2023, the SFP conference in Oxford. This is an image from 2020 in London. It's a protest march in London, Black Lives Matter. A lot of what was happening then was a very heightened focus and a lot of interest and a lot of movement around the murder of George Floyd, that you'll remember, and the rise of the campaign Black Lives Matter. And this is an image from 2020, very different to the image of the SFP conference in all sorts of ways. This was a moment of very strong action and a lot of discussion and discourse around the issue of race and anti-racism. Here's another image from that same time, which you'll all recognize, the statue of Colston being thrown into the docks in Bristol, again, 2020. There's a lot of anger and a lot of focus on racism. And this is an image from a protest that I attended in Brighton, which I think this now sits on the front of the REDI Review Tool, but I think it's to say, this is serious stuff, and it's also it's about being active. To be quietly not racist is not enough. Be anti-racist. So I'd shown those images because they set the scene from my point of view, my perspective of where we started REDI for Change. And the first thing I think we should acknowledge is it shouldn't have taken this to start it. It's crazy that it took this upwelling of feeling and anger around a particular murder. There had been many other murders before that, and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, it did come to prominence, but it had been in existence already. So why did it take this for us to take notice? And I think that's a question we can all ask ourselves a little bit. But I think it's a question that we asked ourselves in the SFP program. And I'm going to take you back again to the summer of 2020 and questions that were raised by my colleague Elisa Graham-Brown at the time at an SFP team meeting, a program team meeting. What is SFP's response to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement? We didn't have a response. We hadn't been really taking much notice of this or paying much attention to it. But we did. I think her raising that question, first of all, I felt ashamed that we hadn't asked the question before. What are we doing about representation and about diversity? But what we're doing about racism within the SFP program. And again, it's a question we can all ask ourselves in our work. Why did it take something like that? Awful stuff that was happening for us to take notice of this. So this timeline, going back then to the summer of 2020, it should have gone back a long time before that, is the point I'm laboring slightly here. The second point on the timeline was the fact that we did decide that we were going to do something about it, and we weren't quite sure what to do. And as a facilitator, as someone who believes in the participatory approach to development, I felt we needed to listen to the people that we work with and that we support. That's listening to the membership of the Sustainable Food Places program, listening to our colleagues within the program, getting people together online. It was, unfortunately, because it was 2020, to share thinking about what we need to do and why we need to do something. And it was for me, very influential moment in this process. We had some very good speakers who basically had a conversation about why they were angry, why stuff had to happen now, why we don't go back over all of the examples of racism that people have faced, themselves included, and why we needed to look forward at what we're going to do about it rather than rehashing it. That was quite an influential starting point, and it gave us some pointers of what we could do within a program such as ours. And we did feel that we had to do something because we acknowledge that it's a big program. We've got nearly 100 members now in the network, and so what we do within SFP could have a large impact and a big impact on food sector generally in the UK and food systems working more generally. So we did have a role to play here if we did it right. So what is REDI for Change? What came out of that first webinar that we held? REDI for Change and an understanding that we're talking about is an overarching anti-racist ethos. It's not a program, it's not a work strand, it's looking at culture and developing an ethos across the Sustainable Food Places program. And a process at that point, and what we're still talking about largely, a process for integrating actively anti-racist principles across our UK-wide program and our members network. And we set out some guiding questions that we felt that we needed to address. And I won't read through them all there, but you can see them on the screen. What does it look like when it's done right? What can we do to dismantle oppression within our food systems? How can food partnerships, how can the membership of the SFP network actually contribute to this? And how can the program support members to be actively anti-racist? So those were guiding questions that we had within the program, and for the Ready for Change ethos. So out of the launch and out of the work and the discussions that were going on, we brought together a working group from people who attended that webinar to co-produce the REDI Review Tool. Because what people felt was, we don't really want to run an audit. We don't want to count bums on seats and numbers, and we don't want to simply say we want to see more people of color in a picture of our coordinators at a conference. We need to change things more fundamentally. And to do that, we needed to ask some sometimes quite searching questions. So I'm not sure, I can't see who's on the screen, any of the people who are here today who are actually involved in that co-production process, but it was basically looking at what are the conversations, what are the questions we need to ask ourselves in order to look at our organizations through the lens of race. So the team did this. They started pulling this together, and this is where we developed the tool, the REDI Review Tool, to help people reflect on the organizations in which they worked. So that was happening in the spring of 2021. So ultimately, what came out of that was the REDI Review Tool, not only a set of principles, but a methodology, a tool for understanding how representative, equitable, diverse, and inclusive our organizations and food partnerships are. And as I say, it's the REDI Review Tool, which was the basis for the work of the pilot projects, which happened in 2023. And again, just very brief slide there. It's about critical self-reflection, sharing perspectives. It's about being able to have a structure and a sort of a guided sequence of questions that you can follow to review what you're doing in your organizations through the lens of race, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to reflect on current behavior within your organizations under 12 topics, and the themes there about culture and policies, internal practices, and the people who are involved. So July 2022, it took a while to get it together, but we got it together, and it's now been added to the SFP toolkit in July 2022. And we held an internal sort of network session there, just introducing it to people. That was the sort of forerunner to this session today. We also had a go at using the tool. You know, I've been involved in developing it. Others in the team in Food Matters had not been involved in developing it, but we actually were the first organization to test out the tool, to have a go at doing it. And this is us. We took an afternoon, which wasn't enough time. And we sat down and we not only went through the tool, but continually asked ourselves, what does this feel like to go through this process? We needed to test it to see what it might feel like for similar organizations to ours. And we're probably more similar to food partnership organizations than the other two partners within SFP program. So the Soil Association and Sustain are different organizations to ours. This isn't all of the people in Food Matters, but it's all of the people who were in Brighton at that time, minus Vicky, who took the photograph there. And at that time, Jada Phillips was with us as an intern, a person of color who could bring a really interesting perspective to what we were exploring in the use of this tool. So that's us in 2022 using the review tool. And you can see there's a dial on the wall there. I'll explain what that is in a minute. There's quite a lot of notes which have been written, put up on the wall to cover the conversations and the discussions that we were having. And that leads us to last year, the Ready for Change pilots, where grants through the SFP program were provided to 3 food partnership organizations around the UK, in Islington, in Shropshire and Plymouth, to do what we did in Brighton, to take the tool, but to see in a bit more depth how the tool and how the REDI ethos could be applied to their organizations and how it could help support them to become anti-racist in their activities in their organizations. So that's not the end of the timeline. The timeline will continue, but that's why I'm going to stop looking at the timeline for the moment. So ready for change. That was in 2023 that we finished off there. This is also 2023, and it doesn't look like much has happened, if that is anything to go by. It's rather simplistic reading of this image, but yes, it's not very diverse in terms particularly of people of colour. So where is the REDI Review Tool? Hopefully some of you will have seen it and been there and visited it. This is the home page, the landing page of the Sustainable Food Places program, our website, and you can see up in the top corner it says Food Partnership Toolkit. I'm just going to stop sharing this screen and take you on a walk through, if I can organize myself, a walk through the tool. So hopefully now you can see the website. Can you see that, Callum?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay. So this is where we were. We were looking at the Food Partnership Toolkit. This is the whole toolkit for all of the resources that we pulled together over the years to help you build a partnership, to help develop a food strategy, and to review and refresh. And there's also an extra one there on remote working. But this is the toolkit, the repository, the holding space for all of our tools that we put together. And this is the one that we're focusing on down here. I don't know if you can see my cursor on there, but Race, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Review Tool. And I'm just going to click into it and take you on a quick walk through the tool itself if it loads. Now, how long do I stay patiently waiting for this to load? In which case I'll try the Excel tool instead. Because fortunately I also have this on my screen. So I'm going to, I did actually click on the PDF version and that should have opened, but it didn't. But I'm going to go into the Excel version. There are two versions here. One is a sort of automated scoring system on it. So I will show you a walkthrough based on the Excel version. And again, Callum, can you see that clearly?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So this is the front page. I'm not going to take too much time about it because a lot of what's in here I've already just gone over in our quick story so far. So there's an overview of what it's about and the questions that we need to address, why it's happening now, and also how it works. There's a little bit more detail there, and there's a little bit about the language that's used and an acknowledgement to the people involved in the co-production. You go into the introduction, that again tells you a little bit about how it was developed. One of the things that came out of the work in Brighton and the work with Jada is a new part of this tool, which is under this tab here that says Sankofa. And there was a recognition in Food Matters, at least, that we weren't really ready to start asking ourselves questions, and we didn't necessarily have enough understanding of what the obstacles and issues are within the food system in the UK. And Jada was in the process of writing an amazing report, which it focuses on British colonialism in the past and the impact that has on the present day UK food system. And she's called it the Sankofa report. Sankofa is a principle from the Akan people of Ghana. It's not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten. And it's about knowing your history and heritage will help you looking forward. So it's not wrong to look back if you want to go forward better. And And I think this is a really important piece of reading for anybody who's interested in doing work on themselves and on their organizations around race. It just sets the context. It's a really eye-opening piece of work, which is why it's included there as sort of required reading. As you work through these tabs, and it's exactly the same on the PDF, but just in a continuous document, it also gives you a guide to what the structure of the tool. Again, here's the 3 main topics and the 12 different themes that the conversations can happen around. Again, all co-developed, all from the conversations we had with the working group there. Laid out a little bit more detail here, what the themes are and the topics within them. And then we get on to the actual process. You saw when we were doing the work in Brighton that we had a big dial. The dial is the output, if you like, of the process. It's not the most important bit. The most important bit is the conversations that you have when you're going through the actual review. And that's this scoring page. So under each theme and topic, you have a question. Your partnership is considered and defined what active anti-racism and the REDI principles mean in relation to you and your organization. And then some examples of what good looks like. And what you can do is then have a conversation about this. There's an area below each main theme where you can write notes. And you can do this all on a laptop sitting in front of you, or in the way that we did it, you can actually do it up on a flip chart on the wall and color in the sections. But this is the scoring here. You as a group come together, you may see things differently, in which case you need to document that. But once you have come to some sort of consensus, you can actually click along here, give yourself scores for different parts as you go through the process. And the reason I'm showing you this is because the dial on the next tab automatically fills in and shows that score and gives you a graphic representation that you can then have another conversation about. You know, why have we got gaps in some places? Why are we doing well in some places and less well in other places? What do we need to do to sort of fill the gap that we can see in this bit of the dial here? And that's exactly what we also did in the version that we have up on the wall when Food Matters went through this process. I'm not going to linger too long on that. The final bit is just some resources and some areas of support in terms of organizations, which we need to continually update and add to. It has really important reading that you can do. And again, there's going to be gaps there that we need to fill, and some extra reading that you can do to sort of give you different perspectives on what we're talking about here. Okay. Phew. That was quite a quick run through and a walk through, if you like, of what it looks like and the story so far to get to where we are now. I'm just going to pause quickly there just to sort of see if anybody has anything they just want to ask, just to clarify anything about what you've just seen there. And I know I just threw quite a lot at you, but is there any questions or anything that you'd like me to clarify about the tool and the story so far? Okay.
Hi, I've got
So,
a question. Sorry, I couldn't find my hand.
Okay,
My electronic hand. I'm just wondering about do you have a recommendation on who you involve in that process of answering those questions about the REDI review?
I think I can only talk on behalf of Food Matters, really, in terms of the recommendations. I think it'd be very interesting to put that question in a minute to the people who are involved in the pilot project, because it's not always clear what your organization is. I know some food partnerships are structured and have very clear governance structures. Food Matters is a small organization. We did want to include people who weren't in Brighton, but they were actually unwell that day, unfortunately, and we do want to run the process again and involve them. But we could involve our whole organization, because there's only, I think, 8 of us at the moment. So we can do that. But I recognize that if you are a partnership, you might not have an organization as such yourself, but the partnership has many different tentacles reaching out into your communities and into your food system. I don't have a strong recommendation, other than I would say if you do have like a steering group or a management group or a group that does come together and represents your wider partnership, that's what I would recommend for a partnership to focus on, is those people to look at themselves to begin with. They will provide some sort of representative voice for the whole organization. But I think the point is that you would then take this process out into your partner organizations. And I know that there's examples within the pilot projects that we did where that has happened. I'm thinking of Shropshire in particular. But I don't know if that helped, Gemma.
That does. Thank you.
What makes sense to you, where you think you can have good impact, and it's still practical, is the key thing there, I think. Any other questions just before we move on to sort of sharing the experience a bit more? Okay. I'm going to press on if that's okay. I should also check if there's any questions that have come up in the chat there. I can't see any. Did you notice any come in, Callum?
No questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So I've said a little bit about Food Matters being the first organisation, or the first of the sort of SFP group to sort of take on sort of the review tool and run with it and see how it felt, but also to see if it would have any impact on us as an organisation and give us some idea of what to do next in order to embed this ethos in the way that we work. We also felt within our program, the SFP program and the working group, that we wanted to support partnerships who were interested to take on the tool and to look at their own organizations and how we might be able to embed the principles and the ethos in their organizations, to pilot the use of the REDI Review Tool and to see what impact it might have on them in becoming organizations which are anti-racist, actively anti-racist, but also looking at diversity more broadly. And the 3 grants were provided to the 3 partnerships: Islington, Shropshire and Plymouth. And we do actually have people from each of those partnerships with us today, and I've asked them to sort of think a little bit about their experience of using the tool. So through 2023 they used the tool and looked at the REDI approach and how they could be applied to where they were. And I thought the best way to do this would be to have a bit of a conversation around some key questions with people from those organizations. And I can see we've got Ian and Jarbo from Plymouth now sitting with Ella and that quite crowded looking screen in the corner there. We've got Jenny, who's coming in from Shropshire, from the food partnership there, and Sherry also from Choices London, who's a partner within the Islington food partnership. So welcome to the 3 groups there, the 3 partnerships. I'm going to sort of pose some questions and we'll take it fairly informally, but if you want to jump in, either of you from those 3 groups or anybody else with a question, please, again, hands up and we'll go like that. But the first question I was going to put to you, the pilot people, is why was it that you wanted to apply for this Ready for Change pilot grant? Why was it important to you and your food partnership to do this? And I think I might just put that to Jenny first, if that's okay.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I mean, we're in Shropshire, which is actually quite a white county. I mean, there's pockets of diversity in the more urban areas, but overall the sort of statistics are very low. but we felt it was really important to consider how we can, specifically be inclusive with what we felt were quite sort of hard to reach groups. So we were then looking at, okay, within a rural context, how could we apply a toolkit to help us on that journey, and then look at the sharing of that with the other counties that share the bioregion. And we did take a broader approach, as we mentioned, really looking at equity and inclusion across a range of different sort of lenses on diversity. So we were looking at access, vulnerability as part of that, sort of more broadly, and disability and kind of gender as well. So but yeah, that's enough for now.
Thank you. And I, as Jenny said, I did draw attention to this. It was very interesting. We did have a conversation right at the beginning of the pilot group coming together, is should we be just only focusing on race, or should we look at how, in this instance, Shropshire could look at a broader scope when we're talking about diversity? And we didn't all agree, and I think that's absolutely fine. But I think it's been valuable because it shows that the tool and the process and the model that we've developed could be applied more broadly with a few tweaks. So we'll get on to that in a minute when we talk about process. But thank you for the moment, Jenny. I'm going to go to Plymouth, if that's okay. And I'm not sure who wants to share, whether it will be Jarbo or Ian. So Jarbo, who was came in a bit late, but Jarbo is also part of the Diversity Business Incubator in Plymouth and a key partner in Food Plymouth there. Hi, Jarbo.
Hi, everyone.
I don't know who wanted to lead on this. Do you want to lead off, Ian, or is it Jarbo?
Well, if I just say a bit about the context, then Jarbo can talk about the content, as it were. So the context of this was originally some support that Food Plymouth did with Jarbo and colleagues when they were setting up the Jabulani International Food Court, and Andrew Shadrake and myself from Food Plymouth supported on that, and we're actually in the building where Jabulani is at the moment, which is great. So that was that. But the broader context is Plymouth being a Home Office dispersal area for refugees and asylum seekers in an area that is still very, very white. It's still 92 or more percent.
Yes, 93%.
Yeah, white indigenous people. And also it's got a military history of going out and bashing the rest of the world, which leads to a certain, a lingering mindset of that as well. More of a conquering mindset than an exploratory mindset, really. So everything that goes with that, really. So that was really the context, and our really wanting to, and interesting enough, I think you made a really key point earlier, is that my approach to this throughout has been releasing potential. There's so much dammed up potential being wasted by not allowing people, from around the world to contribute fully. That was just a crying shame and needed correcting. So there was a lot of that's part of my motivation. So I'll stop there anyway, but that's the background.
Brilliant. Jarbo, before we go on to sort of what you actually did, I'm just going to bring in Sherry, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay, just so that Sherry can say, again, why was it important for you in Islington to take this on? I will come back to you though, Jarbo.
No problem.
Thank you.
I think for us it was important to do this because following COVID, we've been doing a lot of stuff around public health, and we've done a lot around food banks and food cooperatives, and we were working towards equality and equity and diversity. And so we had groups called Challenging Inequalities and Working Fairer Together. And I thought this would fit in nicely with the work that the council were doing around that. So that's kind of why I decided to be part of this, because it just, you know, it seemed integral to what we were doing. And therefore, you know, I put it to them and they were like really eager and welcome to participate. So
Which is
it was the
fantastic.
right thing at the right time.
Perfect. Thank you, Sherry. So now I will go back to you, Jabo, to you might want to give a little bit more context, but I'm quite interested in knowing sort of how did it go? You know, what were your key thoughts on sort of the process of looking at Ready for Change in relation to what you're doing in Plymouth?
So thank you very much for the time. I think Ian touched on it. But for us, what is really, really important was that research, because most of the time we do, and there's a lot of activities that have been done. We have a lot of people pioneering ideas, we're still pioneering ideas, but it's not researched through and it's not published. It's, yeah, they've heard about it. So how it works, for example, with what we do here in Plymouth, where we create that, it's more forcing our way through to create inclusivity in places where there's not that inclusivity. The simple example is why we created the market outside the museum. So a British museum, where when you go there, they tell you you have to be quiet. You have to wear white gloves to touch on anything. And asking the question, why do we have individual from the diverse community visiting? And I said, well, you need to turn this upside down. That culture of saying have to be shh and then wearing, have to change, because that's not my culture. I'm not like that. I'm loud, I'm alive, and I want to touch and see things. So we created a market. We brought food in there, outside the place, outside that museum, which will attract people to come. But they come because of the food. They come, they see what the food, and when they go there, they see. They get a chance to be in the museum, but also the museum get a chance to attract different people from diverse background. But it's all around that food. It's all around about what we have as a common denominator, which is food. This is what we say, everyone eats. We all eat. But there's no matter black, white, yellow, we all eat. So food is really, really a common denominator. And it's just about how to share it and research around it and use it as a catalyst for change.
Fantastic. And what a fantastic initiative. That sounds amazing. Do you feel that the pilot of the REDI approach supported what you were doing there in any way, or do you think this it was just a sort of a raising of awareness and that this was an important initiative to take forward?
I think it did help because, as you call it, a toolkit. It's always good to go with the toolkit instead of testing and trying and not being able to revisit. So the toolkit has given us a chance to come back and say, have we taken a look at this? What the toolkit says? How is it being done at other places? So we compare and trust and see how it goes. So this toolkit has helped us to be guided.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jabo. I think what I'll do is go to Jenny, if that's okay, and ask the same question. You know, how did it go in Shropshire? What was your experience of using the review tool and the REDI approach in your work? And as we introduced, you know, with a slightly broader scope, if you like, what happened with you guys?
Yeah, so we looked at, we took the tool and had to actually adapt it quite a lot and make it a sort of lighter touch for some of the sessions. So we did one with our advisory group. So there were about 12 people that come from across our membership. And we kind of, modified the toolkit, and we can share all those resources online. but it was principally looking at sort of axes of influence and looking at each of those questions, the different areas on that circle, and saying, well, what are we doing now? And, you know, where would we rate ourselves now? And where are we? Where do we think we could get to? And what actions then need to take place? And so that was a valuable exercise. And we wanted to sort of do the same with 4 or 5 partner organizations, but we found it really hard to get them sort of in the middle of this. A lot of them are community organizations, really at the front line of the sort of cost of living crisis. So we found we really had to find a way in for them to be up for, you know, setting aside an afternoon to talk with us on it. So, and that way in was kind of different with different organizations. A common theme was needing to sort of better understand who was actually using their services. And so we ended up doing some quite sort of applied work and meeting people where they were at, and then through that conversation that was addressing seeing how we could support in a really specific kind of need that was relevant to the sort of big wider conversation around equity and diversity, and then kind of bringing the toolkit in sort of behind that, if you like. So we've got a number of kind of resources that were developed for different settings, and a key thing that came out was our statement of commitment as a food partnership. So that was obviously within our direct control because we are a CIC, and so we could agree to have that, and then sharing, you know, that as an example to try and inspire others, and looking at providing specific materials that could help. So, for example, looking at getting more diversity into trustee roles and things like that, that were very kind of tangible areas that responded to some of the specific kind of questions that had come up out of the process. And then so we had this look at it internally as in Shropshire Good Food Partnership, apply it with our members, and then as a final phase, the sort of sharing with the other food partnerships in the Marches area. So Powys, Monmouthshire, Herefordshire, and again, that ended up, it wasn't as kind of full of a piece of work as we'd originally envisaged, but we at least, got to have a session where we shared and, flagged up the ways in which they could perhaps draw on our experience and use some of the resources.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to add in a little bit of my experience in Brighton as well when we ran the tool, and it tallies with what you said. And I know that Sherry in Islington, who's just had to leave us, unfortunately, found the same thing, that it's quite difficult to go straight into using the questions in the tool and to dive straight in. There needs to be some sort of easing in and some wider, broader questions maybe about, what do we look like at the moment from the outside? Why is this important to us? Are we the right people to be doing this? Do we need help from someone to do this with us? How are we going to sort of take what we do in the sort of core team and roll that out into our sort of partner organizations? There is quite a lot of preparatory work that needs to be done before you go straight into the tool. And I'll just flag up that it's something that we want to sort of build into additions to the review tool resource. some of the sort of a little bit of a guide of how you ease yourself into it, how you begin the process, rather than just taking the tool and running with it. So I'll just flag that up as well. I know that Sherry did quite a lot of that with quite, just as I say your name, you return. I was just sharing some of your experience, Sherry, of it's difficult to jump straight in and use the tool, and that there was quite a lot of sort of preparatory conversations that you felt were necessary before embarking on this. And I know that the other thing you did was you didn't do it in a one-er. You had a sequence of workshops over a number of weeks where you came back to it, and did it in more than one go. So brilliantly. I hope it's okay. You don't mind me doing this. I'll hand straight back to you if that's okay.
Sorry about that. I just had to go and deal with a bit of a problem. But yeah,
Okay.
we did ours in stages, because I just kind of felt like I wanted to get to know the group that I was working with a bit, and just find out where people were coming from and set boundaries and all of that kind of stuff. But it was really nice, to be quite honest. It was nice because I think it was broken down into little chunks, and people were given the opportunity to view their opinions and to say how they felt with it. And we didn't all agree. So which was nice. You know, we all had different opinions, and people were able to say how they felt, and it was a safe space. And I think people really enjoyed it, because it's not a process that I've been through, where I've been on the delivery side like that. And I think it kind of balanced things out a little bit. And it was really just nice to, I really got that feeling that people were really committed and invested. And they came to every session knowing what we were going to do at the next session. And, they came with ideas. And, you know, like I said, even when we were scoring, they scored themselves really low, and we were able to talk about that and then increase the scoring, because there were certain things that had been going on. There were certain things that they had done. So for us, it was just it was a good process to kind of challenge ourselves and see where we really were, as opposed to where we thought we were.
Fantastic. And it continues, as I understand it, as well.
It continues, yeah. We are there's a lot of work that's been done around our food partnership, and there's been some real positive outcomes. So now, because the going through that process highlighted a few things, we have a new program called the Black Urban Growers Project, which is where people have called out to Black growers of food that they know. And we've come together. We've got a little bit of funding to set up kind of like incubator growing programs to see if we can grow cultural foods. So that's a nice little thing that's come out of that. We've been asked to actually go through the program with other people. So, for instance, we have Health Watch, which is a very diverse group of people, but they still wanted to challenge themselves, because I think the commonality was that we all are working towards certain things, but are we doing it collectively, and are we doing it in a way that's already been explored? So the REDI tool is actually ticks all of those boxes. Here is a toolkit that you can use that has already been tried and tested, that has worked positively, and you can use it in very different formats and in very different areas and in very various departments. And it doesn't have to be arduous. It can be quite fun. So that's, yeah, it is. We are using it to kind of challenge people.
That's brilliant. I'll add to that, when you go through a process like this, a reflection and a review thing, it's not a stick to beat people with. It's a way you understand where you're at and where you could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that in the all three partnerships who tried and used the pilot tool, that it's not to make you feel bad about where you are. It's to help you find ways of looking forward to where you could be. I think that's really important to look at it in that way. I'm just going to ask you to wrap up a little bit, each of you, by saying, what would you say to someone who's thinking of using this tool in terms of the impact or the lessons learned or top tips? You know, if someone in this room said, I'm thinking of using it, what would you say to them? Ian, I can see that Jabo is no longer with you. Is there anything that you would say as a top tip, or Ella as well, who's been involved in Plymouth?
I mean, it's really interesting, I think, from our approach, is that what we've focused on is actually trying to get to the intentions and the outcomes of the REDI in conjunction with developing the use of the tool. So we didn't do the tool first, heading to outcomes. We did that, and particularly around the leadership of people of colour, and I think we've been fairly successful in that. You know, with Jabo and Ella and Purdy Giles, you know, becoming more and more visible. What about yourself, Ella? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the tool helps you become more intentional and think about different steps, and having this approach that is actually aligned with REDI.
Yeah,
is that correct?
I think so. I think that's what we've tried to do. By the way, what I have done in the chat, I've put some info. We did a webinar at the tail end of November, which featured the project that Jabo spoke about, the box and the bazaar. And I'm sure that webinar is available on the SFP, and it'd be well worth a look at if you could. It's got Jabo and, well, I think Ellie, you spoke on behalf of that, didn't you? And Purdy Giles from Purdy's Punjabi Cuisine on there. So, you know, I hope that's of some help as a resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And it's very interesting. The experience in Plymouth was very different to the experience in Islington and also in Shropshire. And there was some a little bit of antipathy to begin with, if I'm right, in Plymouth. But again, the process and the fact that there was the grant to support the work and to support the involvement of the Diversity Business Incubator is what has powered quite a lot of these new initiatives going on in Plymouth. But I'll just throw that in there very quickly. I'll come to Jenny, if that's okay. Just, you know, what would you say to someone in this room if they were thinking of embarking on this journey of using the tool and embedding the ethos? Top tips, lessons learned, and impact that it's had.
Well, I actually think the most significant thing was actually mentioned by Kate in her intro. You know, how it's actually a means of enriching the work and what are you missing, as opposed to, I think when we were first trying to open the conversations, it was feeling like us as the food partnership were telling people what they should, you know, be doing, and it seemed as such a sort of tick box thing, and just around compliance and how you shift the narrative on that to make it something that's fun and supportive and going to enable these organizations that are very much at the front line and feeling like they're being kind of under pressure from all angles, that it can help them in what they're doing. And it's kind of how to switch that over, and very much seeing what are the key sort of hooks in and conversations, and the tool being something then to back that up and provide more of an evidence base, but not, you know, the starting point, and then having a few sort of really nice tangible outputs. I mean, we've also got a community growing space which refugees are engaging in as one of the things that's come out.
Brilliant. I think that's something that we definitely need to have a bigger conversation about, is how to cast this in a slightly different way and frame it in a different way. But it's not about a duty that you need to do something or should do something. As you say, it's a way in which you can enrich what you're doing. And it's a very different positive lens that you apply to it. And I think it's something that we as a group should definitely be looking at trying to achieve with this tool. I'm just going to quickly ask again, finally, to Sherry, what would your top tip be? What would you say to someone in the room who is thinking of embarking on this?
I think the thing would be to look at what you're doing already. and focus on the positives, because there are some areas that are going to be doing really well. And then there are some areas where you could be doing better or much better. But it's coming from a place of positivity and, you know, non-judgmental, not blaming, not pointing the finger, and really just allowing people to say how they feel. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't, I think is really important that everybody has a voice and is able to say how they feel truthfully without, you know, without any judgment being made about that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, the three of you. I think hopefully that gives other people in the room a flavour of your experience of using it, and also a general feeling that this is a positive thing. I think that's come out very clearly from what you've all been saying, is this can enrich what you're doing. I think that's really important as a take home from this. Thank you so much. Hopefully that was useful for others. I'm just going to very quickly run through some of what's happening on the back of these pilots and on the back of the work and the story so far. As Jenny talked about, something we did in Food Matters and something that we would like to build in as an additional part of this resource. How do you go about developing a statement of commitment, or an anti-racism statement, if you like? It's something that we did as a group in Food Matters, and we've now got that on our website up front. We've also done that within the Sustainable Food Places program on the back of this work, because before we did the process, you would look at Food Matters and say, what a brilliant organization, really nice. It doesn't look like an organization for people of color. It doesn't look like, you know, Sherry would have looked at Food Matters and said, where am I here? I don't see myself. So we're beginning to actually address that and say, we're a good organization, we're good people, but we also believe and are committed to do something to be actively anti-racist and try and represent and be more diverse in what we do. So a statement of that is something which is important to work on, and we'd like to build that in to an addition to the resource. Also, you know, those questions about how do you start this process? What are the big broad questions you might want to ask before you get into it? Again, Sherry and I, this goes in fits and starts, but Sherry and I are supporting Lewisham, who are also, they've got up and they've actually used the tool since the pilots have happened. And we're the three organizations, myself with Sherry and Simone Riddle from Lewisham, are trying to pull together a sort of training process that we could provide to people, and also a workshop template that you could use to run the REDI Review Tool. And again, it's Sherry and myself and Simone from Lewisham, just because we're all quite close, but I'd really be pleased to build in any other experience, Jenny from Shropshire and the experience from Plymouth, as and when we can, to try and develop this resource. We're also looking at some of the adapted tools that came out of Shropshire, and very grateful for Jenny having actually just posted those, so you can see there's a link to them in the chat. But to look at those adapted tools, and again, it might be specific to Shropshire, but probably not. It's something that everybody could learn from. And I think we should add this as a link on the review tool so that people have access to those more widely, and to show that, you know, the review tool isn't cast in stone. It will evolve. It will continue to evolve, and we will continue to add to it. It will become a huge thing eventually, and we might have to split it up a little bit because it's too big and unmanageable. But at the moment, I think we can add links, useful resources, other things that people might want to make use of. And finally, within the group, within the pilot group, and also within the program, the SFP working group, we've been talking about a checklist that you could apply to initiatives that you are running in your partnership or in your organizations, to make sure that they are ready for change, to make sure that they are recognizing a need to be diverse and inclusive and representative, and to ask yourself questions when you're designing these initiatives to make sure that they are actually not putting up obstacles to people to get involved, but actually making it easier to get engaged. So that's what's happening on the back of the pilots. We're also within this last year of the SFP program of the phase 3 funding, before we go into a potential phase 4, we're looking at tidying things up and recognizing that there may need to be some groundwork for the network, what we're calling baseline training on the issues, some of the conversations that I said we're not going to have today, but there will be other opportunities for that. And we've also recognized that we may not have the expertise and the experience to do that properly. So we've brought in and recruited a collaborating partner organization to help us do that. And Kate, who's here from Anemo Leadership, we're going to be developing a series of what we're calling baseline or foundational training around the issues that need to be discussed, a series of sessions to sort of open that up. And we're going to be developing that again within the working group and directly with the Anemo leadership on that. That would also lead on to work around how we develop what we're doing with REDI into an anti-racism strategy. And again, we're hoping to develop that strategy before the end of this year, working in and being supported and steered by Anemo leadership. So I've just laid it out very basic nuts and bolts of it there, but I will just sort of bring in Kate to say a quick hello and welcome, Kate. It's so great to have you on board, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to come out of this collaboration. But yeah, over to you.
Me too. I'm really excited, and it's been so nice to hear what's happened already on the REDI Review Tool and the work that the food movement has started on this EDI anti-racist journey. I know Sarita, because we do already work with Sustain. We also work with Compassion in World Farming. So we've got a few clients already in the food movement. But Anemo Leadership was born 4 years ago to create courageous leaders in the third sector only, third and public sector. We don't work with corporates, not because they don't need leadership support, but because we believe that the fabric of society is in the third sector, and that's being eroded at the moment, which is why we like to focus our energies here. My background is in the third sector, in the youth sector, and also in social housing. So I've led big teams, I've managed change. And more recently, now we're in our 4th year at Anemo Leadership. It's me and my wonderful work wife, Maria. We are the co-founders, and we have a team of brilliant associates who we will be working, 2 people will be working on this collaboration with sustainable food places. So Ben and I have talked a little bit. We're delighted to be working on this project. And from what I can hear about the REDI Review Tool and your approach here, it's very much about co-creation, which is exactly how we like to work at Anemo Leadership. So this is about helping you with this baseline training, first of all. So we're going to be doing, we split this work into 2 phases. This baseline training that Ben had mentioned, where we're going to be sort of kind of just giving a broad brush approach to equity, diversity, inclusion. There's a lot of language and terminology, systems of oppression, unconscious bias. We're going to be delving into these to help people to kind of get to a particular point with their equity, diversity, and inclusion journeys on a personal level. For any of you that have done this work, there is a very personal journey that you might go through, particularly thinking about exploring my whiteness and how that shows up and how that prevents me from seeing things, and then what happens in an organization, and then on a macro level, what's happening with that system of oppression in the UK. And racism is the strongest system of oppression, and I've been brought up in the UK, lots of us will have been brought up in the UK, and we will have had that socialized in us. So how do we notice that and start to break it down? So I really feel that you as a movement, as a group, are trying to do that. So I'm really excited about helping you to do that in the first phase. We're doing 4 workshops. We haven't quite decided how we're going to split those workshops up. That will Ben and I will bottom that out, whether we do 4 of the same workshops to get more people in and experiencing the workshop, or whether we do that as a series that builds on from one to the other. So we're yet to decide on that. Then we've got the second phase of this piece of work, which is about developing the anti-racist strategy. And what we're hoping is, from the baseline training, people will be exploring their own EDI journeys and be going, this is really interesting work. I now want to take this forward and be part of the working group to develop the anti-racist strategy. So we're looking for about 20 people to form the working group for the anti-racist strategy. And depending on who comes forward, we have mooted the idea with Ben that we would have a white working group and we would have a global majority working group. And the 2 would come together at the beginning and the end, but they would also then be focused on different things, partly because there is a movement and a school of thought around whiteness and whether global majority people actually need to be in that space to hear us exploring, talking about our white fragility and how to notice that. So the idea behind this is that we would have a global majority working group who would be doing some strategy work about visioning. What does it feel like in the movement to be an anti-racist movement? And that would be a very visionary group, and that we would then, as the white working group, we would be responding to the vision from the global majority working group. So they would be the kind of guiding light for our work. This would be led by a global majority facilitator as well, in case you're wondering whether the white person who's talking right now is going to be leading that group. No, it's not me. And then at the end, I will be kind of bringing both of the groups together if this is the way it works. And I will be drafting the strategy. Then I will circulate that to the working group to check that that's reflective and it feels right for a draft strategy, which will then be signed off via Ben and your network of signing off and approving. So that, in a nutshell, is what I'm hoping to do. Really excited to be doing this work, and thank you for inviting me, Ben, to kind of get up to speed on where you are with the REDI review.
Brilliant. And this is hot off the press. Animo have only just been recruited, basically, so it's early days, but already I can sense an excitement around this when I share it with people. We'll be bringing together the working group and the pilot representatives of the pilot teams as well to discuss this further with Kate in terms of co-designing the way this is going to look. So I just want to say a big thank you to Kate for coming along and sort of introducing herself and the plans there. I do want to say that phase 4, we will be looking at a sort of broader EDI approach based on what we're learning in this work around race. And there could be hopefully a development process based on what we've done so far, which is looking at that broadening into a wider diversity focus, a wider diversity lens. And that's where we're hoping this is going to go ultimately. As Kate said, it would be really good to build up and recruit on those baseline sessions that are going to be delivered, people who really feel they want to take a role in this. And I want to just put it to you, if you already think, yes, that's something I'd like to be involved in, just pop your name and saying that you want to be involved, put that in chat. Even now you might feel, yes, I'm up for that. So feel free to put your name in chat straight away. We're a little bit over. I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for coming, but in particular to Jenny from Shropshire, to Ella Jarbo and Ian in Plymouth, and to Sherry in Islington for their contributions there. in terms of sharing their experience. Hopefully it's made you think, yes, that's for me. I want to look at how to apply this where I am. That I want to make that change. I want to become actively anti-racist in my organization. If so, please have a look at the tool, go through it, contact us if you need any support with it. Thank you everybody for joining in. I'm going to leave it there. I hadn't, I'm looking at the time thinking people will want to get off. Does anybody have any question or anything they want to ask just before we say goodbye? I should have said that first, shouldn't I? Okay, well, look, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great seeing you all on screen, and hope you have a good remainder of the day.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.